Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Man's Hour, episode 56 on Longhouse Christianity. I'm joined by fellow gentleman of power here, once again, making his return to Man's Hour. It is Not Me, Not You. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Red Hawk. Thanks for having me back. I really look forward to this topic because it's at once depressing and hilarious.
Yeah, I did a quick little stream about this topic last week after I got into a bit of a Twitter row with a couple of trad characters, and I wasn't very satisfied with it. And I was literally just thinking about this as I was doing the stream. I was like, man, what would be really good to have on to discuss this topic is you. So I'm glad you were able to take the time to discuss this here because, every time you and I've met in person, like at the, Shieldings events and stuff in the States, this is a topic that has like come up between the two of us. And we just click very, very well together. And so I always enjoy having a nice conversation with you.
Yeah, likewise, man. We got that kind of je ne sais quoi. I don't know. But it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically what I wanted to do with this stream is kind of tackle this problem of Longhouse Christianity in two parts here. The first part I wanted to talk about, which was a portion of what I talked about in my quick little Tales of the Game stream last week, is the political realities of the church as it relates into history and as to where we stand right now. And I guess the first place to start would be is establishing that. Would you agree with me, my friend, in saying that like the church is like a political institution, like from the very founding? It has an agenda. It has policies to set forth, and all that kind of stuff. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, of course. The church, if it is Christ's wife or body on earth, then it has to be political. It has to contend with the political forces of man.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. And I guess the point that we have to bring up here is that Christianity's been around for over 2,000 years at this point, and it's gone through many changes, many schisms and such, and not just through denominational squibbles, which we could definitely touch on, but just like seeing how like something like the Roman Catholic Church, which is supposed to be like ground zero, has changed throughout the years. I guess the main point I want to get at here is contrast the modern day church, something that's coming out of somebody like Pope Francis's mouth, like about letting in the refugees to save Europe or whatever, and contrast that with the Crusades, the Ghibellines, even the Age of Exploration, like with Cortez and Pizarro, like these kinds of men. And I know you have a lot to say because you're definitely more read on Evola than I am, but this definitely goes into the the left hand versus the the right hand path of transcendence here. So why don't you give the gentleman in the audience here just a brief overview of those two paths to transcendence, and why do you think this is important for us?
Yeah, so in Evola's conception, the left-hand path to transcendence is the path of the warrior, the sublimation of oneself to pure action. That could be through combat, but that could also be through other things, like building something. Whereas the right-hand path is the path of the ascetic or the path of the monk, which is the sublimation of the self to an idea, to a principle, to perhaps to God. So in modern Christianity, the left-hand path is completely shunned, and the right-hand path is embraced as pretty much the only way to be a true Christian. And it obviously wasn't always this way.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, just like the list of examples that I just gave right there. Obviously, the Knights Templar and the Crusades. A personal favorite of myself, and of course a favorite of Bronze Age Pervert, is the Age of Exploration. The late 1400s into the early 1600s of European powers, most notably the Spanish, because they were actually a Catholic country as opposed to the British that were obviously Anglican Protestant. But they spread Christianity throughout the entire, I guess you call it the New World, New Spain, all the way down through South America and such. They spread it to more places than St. Paul did, yet they are not looked around and deified in the same way that he is, which is interesting. And this is definitely something that BAP points out in Bronze Age Mindset. So it's interesting to contrast this with, just like the I don't know. I don't really like the term "cucked Christianity," but because it has a bunch of negative connotations that I don't necessarily think are fair, especially as somebody who comes from the church background myself. But man, they're really they're really trying their darndest to live up to that stereotype these days.
Oh yeah, I mean it's Christianity obviously being an expression of man's desire to be closer to God is always going to be kind of trapped within man's proclivities, especially as culture ebbs and flows. But if you don't mind, I'll read a short bit out of Revolt Against the Modern World, where he addresses the different ages of the church. Um, Yeah, Evelyn says during the early centuries of the Christianized empire, in which he's talking about Rome, and during the Byzantine period, the church still appeared to be subordinated to imperial authority. At church councils, the bishops left the last word to the ruler, not only in disciplinary but also in doctrinal matters. Gradually, a shift occurred to the belief in the equality of the two powers of church and empire. Both institutions came to be regarded as enjoying a supernatural authority and a divine origin. With the passage of time, we find in the Carolingian ideal the principle according to which the king is supposed to rule over both clergy and the people on one hand, while on the other hand, the idea was developed according to which the royal function was compared to that of the body and the priestly function to that of the soul. Thereby, the idea of the equality of the two powers was implicitly abandoned, thus preparing the way for the real inversion of relations. So, in our current age, we've definitely the churches, not just the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, and the Protestants have taken this kind of passive back seat to the state, saying basically that the state has the right to rule over earthly matters, whereas the church becomes something entirely private, and it's kind of an abdication of what was previously seen as the responsibility of the church to build a Christian society, as opposed to just have like a people who have Christian ideas in their head.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a direct consequence of the Enlightenment. Obviously, I mean, look back to medieval Europe and the Holy Roman Empire and all the other vassal states within it. I mean, they were all Christian theocracies, basically. And then contrast this with the modern world where we still have theocratic governments. They just happen to be Islamic or another group in the Middle East with small hats that we're not allowed to talk about. But for some reason, anytime that anything vaguely close to something from the state siding in the favor of Christians is just immediately met with disdain from the media, from the state, from everybody saying this is Christian theocrats. I remember when Viktor Orban put in a policy that gave tax cuts for native Hungarians that wanted to have children. This was seen as some kind of Christian theocracy that was rising up or something like that.
Yeah, and I think that is part of I mean that's the secular world responding to something that is at least nominally Christian. And that's because the secular world, I mean, humans aren't secular beings. So to say the secular world is it's kind of like an oxymoron. You can't have a secular world. Humans need some sort of religion. In our current progressive age, that religion is, anti-human. So if you're proposing, oh, we can have lots of babies and, promote our own culture, that cuts against the progressive uh, ideology, the progressive religion. And since the church wants to remain, well, wants to try at least to remain relevant, and they've sublimated themselves to the state religion, or they've become submissive at least in the face of it, then they have to kind of find a way to square that circle. And so they've become feminine in response.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it, it's just it sounds I mean, to us it's obviously just so farcical on its face. It's like, okay, well, surely you're familiar with this like the Christian rock bands, like the rock band churches. I don't know if you've ever attended one of these, but I had a period of time in my late teens when I attended a couple of these things after growing up in like a Catholic as well as Eastern Orthodox. God, I can't even talk today. I got a double dosage of both of those growing up, and I had a period of time where I decided to try out like a couple Protestant denominations and such, and this just felt very off to me. It's just like, oh, okay, we're going to try to appeal to the mainstream modern culture, but still kind of have some semblance of like duty and rules attached to it, while also like wearing the skin suit of the modern world. And it's just like it just fell off to me immediately. It's like, okay, we got guitars right next to the altar. It's just, this is ridiculous, and it's no wonder why the church numbers are going down the tubes.
Yeah, when I was in high school, I had a girlfriend who was Pentecostal, and I think she might be watching this, so I got to watch what I say. But um, I remember going to one of her services at her church where I think guitars made an appearance. If not, they were at least on the stage. But yes, it's this kind of this revelrous like lack of solemnity, lack of organized rites, lack of a hierarchy. It's this kind of chitonic chaotic free-for-all where people are encouraged to let their emotions just kind of run wild, and whatever they feel is put there by the Holy Spirit. And it's the it's this kind of unbridled expression of self that, well, is characterized of the boomer truth regime that we live under, right?
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I just felt really awkward attending it because it like lacked any semblance of seriousness like attached to it. It's just like, this is supposed to be a house of God here. We're supposed to behave and act accordingly here with some reverence here. And we're gonna have like drums and rock bands up there with great big giant television screens, and like I don't know, just felt very very off-putting to me. And every time I've had interactions with my friends who are still attend these kinds of masses, and they talk to me about like, oh, we're members of like Christian youth groups and stuff, and I hear them talk about this, and they're just all completely feminized in Longhouse all the way through. It's honestly embarrassing to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's an aspect of Christianity that Christianity has this kind of double-edged sword that seeks to be a union of the masculine and the feminine, of the solar and the lunar aspects. So in the solar, Christ is a solar figure. He is generative. He is the logos. He is the uncreated creator, or he is the embodiment of such. Whereas the doctrines of sainthood and of passivity are and even burying the dead for bodily resurrection are vestiges of an ancient uh, kind of lunar approach to spirituality. So the reason that Christianity has been so robust is because of its ability to kind of flow with the culture. When the culture becomes more feminine, it can kind of do that as well. Likewise, when it becomes more masculine, it can kind of swerve in that direction. The only question of today is if it becomes so feminine that it eats itself and its children.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, people have made the argument before that one of the reasons why Christianity has lasted so long is that it is a very adaptable religion in that regard. It tends to uh, I'm going to catch the ire of Semiagog if he hears me use the term, but I can't think of anything else. Morph. It tends to morph around, the current culture that it tends to, inhabit. I mean, and you see this. I mean, I'm going to make another point about this later, but you see, like, Christianity practiced in Europe in the 12th century is different than it practiced in America today, which is also different from the way it's practiced in Haiti or in Nigeria or in, South Africa. It's very, very different.
Yes, and this AA was on a PQ's show recently talking about his new book, and he mentioned that the expression of an ideology takes on the lens of the biospirit of the people who adopt that ideology,
Hmm.
and Christianity is no different. Christianity has the God's revelations in um, you know the Bible, but as with all things that men try to communicate, those things are left open to the interpretation of the individual and of the um, society that adopts them, which is a problem, especially if you want to have something that's going to be able to stand up against outward aggression.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did listen to that. I'm Pete and AA stream as well. And yeah, it was an excellent point that was made. But I mean, this is another. Yeah, I was gonna make this point later, but I'll make it now. About how the idea of the modern church, where surely you've heard this point being made before. It's like the church is expanding now; it has more members of it than ever before. But those new members are in like Central Africa or in Southeast Asia or something like this, and just implementing the Roman Catholic Church in these places of the world isn't going to magically turn these places into like medieval Europe. It's also not going to magically turn these places into you know uh, allies or places of refuge for like the actual home world and the homeland of Christianity.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned introducing like Catholicism to sub-Saharan Africa because while Christianity thrived in Europe as a patriarchal society that was patriarchal prior to it being Christian, and then patriarchal up until like what the last like 80, 100 years. The sub-Saharan African societies are mostly matriarchal. So, their expression of Christianity is going to, from the outset, be longhoused instead of what we are suffering under the long houseification of the church.
Yeah, exactly. Which like begs my question again, like to the topic here of the politicization of the church. It's like, okay, that sounds good on paper for you to like increase the Christian numbers on paper throughout the entire world. And maybe that's your prerogative because maybe that's your goal of saying like, oh, that's more people that are going to be saved, which is a theological argument which entirely might be valid and one that I might even be sympathetic to. But then to cross that over as some kind of political goal, while at the same time churches all over Europe are being burned to the ground. There's persecution of Christians all throughout the Western world. Like there's people in Canada that were getting arrested for preaching on street corners and such. And it just seems to me like where's your priorities here?
Yeah, I mean, and not just Canada. People in Britain, what was it? A woman was arrested for standing silently and praying in her head. I think it was something like the officer asked her, like, "Are you praying like to yourself?" She said yes, and she was arrested for this. So yeah, exactly. The church is stuck in this line go up mentality while the room is on fire around them. And it's not just the Catholic Church, it's also the Protestants and even to some extent the Orthodox, but I must admit I have very little interaction with their sphere. But before we get away from it, I don't know how to pronounce this word, so someone is going to give me hell about it later. But the Gulf, the Guelph, the kind of the age that preceded the Ghibellines. It's Guelph for anyone who can speak French. Uh, it was characterized as a very feminine time by Evola, where the priestly caste took precedence over kind of like the emperor, the warrior king. And with the advent of the Ghibelline age, he argues that the reason Christianity became solar and masculine again is because of its encounter with the Nordic peoples who came down and kind of integrated into the society of Europe, and that they brought with them their their pagan roots that colored Christianity as they started to adopt it, which brings up the idea and the doctrine, if you can call it that, of chivalry.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I guess you know, the point that I'm really trying to get at here with all this is that, you know, obviously, we were talking to Charlemagne about this at the most recent event that we were just at here, and him being a Roman Catholic, but also at the same time acknowledging that our situation here in America, specifically, is that if we're going to have any future, like Protestant Christianity is going to have to be at the center of it, because that is what this nation was founded on. And in the past, up until around 100, maybe 150 years ago, um, religion and race were insurmountably intertwined. You could never imagine somebody in Britain being Hindu like 150 years ago. This is a very recent invention here, and what I'm getting at is that, well, it's really about time that the solar masculine energy comes back into the church here, and I'm not quite sure as to how we can reinvigorate that here. But what happens when priests are in charge and there's no warriors in charge? Well, it's like you were describing earlier. It's like, well, line go up is the goal here. Well, it's like, okay, well, what does it matter if the line goes up when Notre Dame burns to the ground? What does it matter when all the ancestral homelands of Christianity are gone, and the actual heritage of that religion is lost?
Yeah, I that is a big concern of mine as well, and I would like to talk to Charlemagne at some point about this. But uh, I have this kind of idea now that just entered my head from this Evola reading, that perhaps Protestantism uh, and the Protestant work ethic were specifically Anglo-Saxon interpretations of Christianity, and that it's not so much that we have to return to Protestantism, is that we have to kind of return to Anglo supremacy.
Yeah, it's an interesting argument. Definitely something that requires more research and more thought and conversation about it. But I'd definitely be open to that discussion for sure. I guess we could kind of shift this over a little bit. I mean,
Well, right, just before we move on to that, I got one more thing about specifically about chivalry and bringing back kind of the masculine focus.
go
If
for it.
All right. So, because Evola kind of contends that the masculine influence comes into Christianity and during the Ghibelline age, because of the pagans who were brought into the faith, he says this: within a nominally Christian world, chivalry upheld without any substantial alterations in Aryan ethics in the following things: one, upholding the idea of the hero rather than of the saint, and of the conqueror rather than of the martyr. Two, regarding faithfulness and honor rather than caritas, which is Latin for love or charity, also can be agape, the Greek word for kind of universal love, rather than caritas and humbleness as the highest virtues. Three, regarding cowardice and dishonor rather than sin as the worst possible evil. Four, ignoring or hardly putting into practice the evangelical precepts of not opposing evil and not retaliating against offenses, but rather methodically punishing unfairness and evil. Five, excluding from its ranks those who followed the Christian precept, thou shalt not kill, to the letter. And six, refusing to love one's enemy and instead fighting him and being magnanimous only after defeating him.
Boy,
So
all those sound great.
I mean, I know, don't they? But the argument here is an unfortunate one that we as Christians have to kind of grapple with, that the thing that made Christianity greatest at its height were fundamentally um, pagan values that were brought in and interpreted through a Christian lens, a kind of synthesis, or at least an attempted synthesis of European pagan ancient Aryan values and more modern, or modern at least insofar as a comparison between Christianity and ancient Aryan rites, uh, modern Christian values. And so if we're going to bring Christianity back with a vengeance, one that takes on more of a solar aspect rather than the lunar one that we seem to be laboring under. Uh, we may have to make some hard concessions.
Yeah, it seems ever more and more likely that that is going to have to be the case as the hour grows ever darker these days. But this will definitely be something we'll have to be looking into more as time goes by. I mean, I think it's obvious that a lot of the synthesis of what you just described was definitely important for the time, specifically, the many raids from people like the Moors, Arabs, Turks, and such. I mean, and we're having an invasion of a different kind these days. Maybe, do you think it actually will require something of the level of, I want to call it like warlike invasion as opposed to the kind of even our invasions these days are soft and feminized. They're not even like masculine conquering ones.
Yeah, it's all drones and fat people sitting behind controls 200 miles away from the front.
Well, yeah, this is a point that's been made before, and I very much agree with it. That the honor in warfare and such really isn't going to return until the individual soldier can physically make a difference on the battlefield again. And many people like Frank Herbert envisioned this in Dune, where they had like personal shields that just eliminated projectile weapons, so melee combat had to make a return. But yeah, I mean that's definitely one way a warrior can return here, because in this age of merchants and priests, where everything is just controlled by dollar signs and missiles, what can the individual soldier do?
Right. It's the distinction between a soldier as a profession and a warrior as a caste or a spiritual calling, which
Mm,
is the soldier kind of negates the warrior, because if the warrior is doing this as a sublimation to the principle of action, to glory, to what it means to just throw one's life away for a principle, rather than the soldier who does it for mercenary means. Uh, yeah, they're kind of antithetical to one another.
yeah, I mean, and it's weird when you look at the world today, where it almost seems like the group of men that are closest to being this cast of warriors that you're describing are in fact mercenaries. Somebody like Wagner comes to mind with me. They've been doing tours throughout Africa for the last like 10, 15 years, just killing terrorists basically. That's like the closest we get these days. Or maybe somebody like Blackwater.
Yeah, the closest we would get to a state-wielded warrior caste is definitely that. But I think you'll find a lot of warrior spirit in MMA fighters and grapplers who do it in kind of an amateur way, or
Oh
kind of a
yeah.
way that isn't something that they profit from monetarily. And even those who do, yeah, I think that's the only place we can still look for that.
Yeah, well, they definitely like it and enjoy it for sure. I mean, well, we've known this for a long time. I mean, men like violence, men like war. It's just part of what we are, really. I mean, what kid, doesn't wake up, at 6 or 7 years old and wants to go play like soldier or cops and robbers with his buddies? It's just, or pick up a stick and whip his buddy with it. It's just literally part of who we are.
Yeah, and to go back to your question about like what's it going to take for that kind of revival, um, of solar Christianity, and whether or not it's going to have to be like a hard invasion. I think that as things inevitably and inexorably decline, uh, it's just going to um, it's going to naturally come back as long as people are able to keep the faith and transmit it to the generations that face real hardship. It will come back in a solar way.
Mm, yeah. Let's hope so. A super chat here from our good friend Hunger the Dye Merchant for $5 here. You would think that after 20 years of the global war on terror, vets, mostly white Christian Americans, would inject some testosterone into the churches. Big sad. Well, yes, this is absolutely true. But hopefully, I don't know, the piratical age will come once again. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're not going to be able to do that when they hit the Longhouse church house and all the the spinster Christian women and the the mothers kind of shun that like the violence and the risk taking that their sons should be doing, because after all, even though these people are nominally Christian, they are still informed more by the culture and more by the education system than they are by the church these days.
Well, absolutely. I mean, like, you go to church for, an hour every Sunday, and you don't, experience it any time outside of it, really. I mean, like, there definitely was like some semblance of this, like, at least when I was growing up, like, uh, one of the clips that was going around Twitter actually this week was a clip from the old X-Men TV show from the 90s, and there was a clip of um God, who was it? Nightcrawler handing Wolverine a Bible, and they were quoting Bible verses, and that's something you would never get today from a cartoon and like Cartoon Network today. So there at least was some semblance of this not too long ago, but now it's just completely gone.
Yeah, I mean, you have a whole generation raised on modern depictions of religious Christians as being kind of lunatics. That's what you're going to get.
Yeah, indeed, the backwards bigots. Yeah, that is always portrayed as such. I guess some shifting gears here. We could talk a little bit more about. I mean, so we've established about the political here, and definitely how the church as it stands right now doesn't exactly have the interests of, I guess, what we would call like traditional Christians in mind these days. Seem far more obsessed with getting along to go along and line go up kind of deal. But let's transfer this into the personal here. I mean, I don't know how much you want to share on this topic, but you've gone out of your way to attend a traditional Latin mass. I have not attended one of these. To be honest, I haven't done too much research as to even if there is one in my area, but I'm curious as to your experience with it. So if you want to add on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was raised in the Novus Ordo, so that's the post Vatican II, the post Second Vatican Council, which was kind of adopted in the 60s. And Novus Ordo is that, you shake people's hands and say, peace be upon you. And, they change the words from spirit to ghost, or I don't know. They kind of make it more modern. But the Latin rite is obviously performed in Latin, but its actions are much more focused on the priest, and the priest is facing the altar for almost the entirety of the service. And the purpose of this is because we're here worshiping the Lord, and the homily is delivered at kind of the middle, but it's not the focus of the rite. And also when everything has a lot of solar aspects to it. The host is raised up into the light in order to be consecrated. The incense is a solar a burning that lifts the smoke upward to kind of wreathe the place in kind of a liminal aspect. It's if you can find a priest who performs it and can sing, because the liturgy is sung in the Latin rite. It's very beautiful and it's very uplifting.
Yeah, I can imagine uh it'd be very moving to hear. When I've attended Eastern Orthodox masses, and much of it is also sung, you definitely feel it more like in your gut at a visceral and spiritual level than kind of like, I guess you call it just the normie like Catholic masses, where yes, there's hymns and such, but it doesn't quite have the same like oomph to it. That's just been my personal experience with it.
Yeah, and that's what drew me to it, because what we were talking about before with the tambourines and the bongos and the guitars up on stage. there's a solemnity to it. There's something that, all right, you're out of the world of just your feelings. You're out of the world of just whatever impulses you have, and now you're into the world of proper hierarchical worship. You're into the world where God has expectations of you, and that if you don't keep them, there's going to be problems. Like it's a transference from this modern day where everything goes into a world of old where God was actually a serious being that people respected.
Yeah, that was going to be a follow up question that I had here because like you attend. I'm sure anybody in the chat will notice this as well, but there's just something really off putting about people attending a church in like a plain white tee, you know, and not like getting dressed up for success. Or the thing that pissed me off the most is people like take out their phones like in the middle of mass or something. It's like, come on, really? Like 1 hour, you can't put this away. It's just there's people who are just like mimicking, like almost like a ghost dance, of like something that they're just here because they're checking a box, like, oh, like mom and dad say I have to go to church, so I might as well, just appear in the seats, but not take any seriousness of what is actually going on here.
Yeah, and that's just a general irreverence that our society has for everything and all institutions. Um, it even now people are surprised if someone shows up to a low level job in like with a tie or like just not in sweatpants, right? But you'd think that people who believe that they're worshiping the creator would at least have the decency to show some respect in what is supposed to be his house. And I actually had this discussion with a friend of mine, because I always wear a suit to church, and he flippantly said, why wear a suit? God doesn't care about how expensive your clothing is. And I get most of my suits on, and I'm not ashamed to say it, from thrift stores. So I'm not spending a lot of money on them. And I told him it's not about the cost of the suit. It's about the effort that you put in to being respectable for the Lord.
Yeah, exactly. It's weird how like people will dress. It's like the same thing like when you're going out on well, I don't want to call it the same thing, but it's the general idea of like going out on a date or something. You're not showing up to a date in your sweatpants, in your wrinkled crumpled up t-shirt, that's sitting in the corner of your bedroom for the past couple of days. It's like it's just an overall, indications of how serious you are actually taking this.
Yeah, and it's just like I said before, it's the expression of our modern culture, like into people's lives when they're in church. There's no separation anymore. It's not the solemnity of the service versus the chaos of the outside. Now everything's just chaos.
Yeah, well, I think another thing here is I'd call it like the breakdown of like your local church as a community, and I think this also ties into the line go up, that we were talking about earlier. Here is like, okay, like increasing butts and seats is one thing, but like in-group preference is undefeated and always will be. And so you're gonna have issues when people try to get together in this regard. Like I, I just don't see cases where this really really works. Like people say like like uh like faith in the church is gonna transcend all things, and I don't know, maybe I just have a different experience with this, but this just doesn't seem to hold water to me in my experience. I mean, I grew up in the suburb of a major blue city, and you had all different groups of people from all over the world there. Some people wouldn't even like speak English, but attending some of these churches, and there was just no community of that church. There was like nobody like walking around saying hi to this person. They were kind of just like people you recognize and kind of like wave to, and shake hands with, but there's no semblance of like, oh, I'm gonna help this person, or I'm gonna ask how their job is going, or ask if I could cook something for them or something like this.
Yeah, it's what we were talking about before with the expression of the faith through the biospirit. So you're going to get these different interpretations. And yes, Christianity is a universal religion, but it isn't until the modern day and the advent of progressivism where we see Christianity saying things, well, Christians saying things like Christianity is universal, therefore there can be no differences between the races. Like it's that
Or the
as long as
sexes. Yeah.
or the sexes, yeah, that our interpretations are going to be the same, or that they're going to turn us into the same people, that they're going to cause us to take the same actions. And that's just like prima facie, it's absurd. But it's because the lens of the progressive religion comes first, and then Christianity is interpreted after that, that we run into this.
Well, exactly. I mean, and this just breaks down the community in a number of levels because with this progressive lens floating over everything now, imagine you trying to reprimand somebody in your church community who is acting afoul. Say somebody shows up in like sweatpants and an NFL jersey on a Sunday, so he can go to the bar afterwards and watch a football game, and not bother to go home and change, but you going up and reprimanding that guy might, cause you to run afoul of, the progressive religion that's, floating over everyone's head like a miasma.
Yeah, line go up, butts and seats, individual expression, boomer truth. It's like you can imagine it now. You tell them, don't come here unless you're going to show some respect. At least like put on a pair of pants, and you'll get mostly from the women, but from the weak men as well. Oh, what does it matter to you how he expresses his love for God? Like, why is it important that he conforms to these ideas that you have about propriety, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the only way to make a forest equal is with an axe. And, yeah, people have definitely seen these pictures before, but you look at pictures of like the Industrial Revolution era in Great Britain, and you saw guys that worked in the coal mines and the factories were still showing up to work in suit and ties and such. I mean, obviously they were more cheaply made than, upper class people would be wearing, but there was this kind of expectation that everyone was supposed to be on, like their best behavior, supposed to be, well dressed and everything. It's yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's the supremacy of the matriarchal idea that the church is a woman in Christianity's conception. It's the bride of Christ, and the church is open to everyone. But Christ is the solar figure and God is a solar figure who makes rules. And so it's kind of the supremacy of the welcoming and accepting nature of the feminine church over the teachings of the masculine God, over the hierarchical structure that God and Christ represent and demand of us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a constant struggle, as it were here. I mean, I guess we could shift this into as well. You see this becoming ever more and more common these days. Female pastors and women, preaching from the pulpit, which was expressly forbidden, for the longest time. And I'm sure there's a Bible quote for it as well. I mean, there's a Bible quote for everything, right? But you know, that's just like the absolute last straw, as far as I'm concerned, in any of these circumstances. I can't imagine, attending one of these masses. Thank God I've never done it, but you know,
Yeah, and Fulton Sheen has a really good I don't know what you'd call it rant on this, but because Christ is the logos, he is the generative force, he is the masculine figure. His nature is masculine. And uh, women don't have the nature requisite to be that generative force to transmit those ideas from Christ uh, in the same way that men do. And it's kind of making you're trying to it's transgenderism, right? It's spiritual transgenderism.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. That's a dark way of putting it, but yeah, pretty pretty on the nose for where we are today. I guess the question comes in here is like, um, so do you find a much more of a thriving community in your Latin mass here? Would you think that people would be able to reprimand people without being scolded, or like there's a semblance of like people are there to help out each other, or yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as an adult, I haven't been to much in the way of Protestant churches or Novus Ordo services, but I know that my community, well, it's mostly white, which I think makes a lot of sense given the Latin rite, but um, a lot of charity work, and I mean, like, work, like, people they show up, they build, we've been slowly renovating our church with nothing but, volunteer labor. When somebody needs something, everyone in the congregation receives an email, and within minutes, you have volunteers, volunteering material, time, whatever it is. I know that there are people in my church that I don't know very well personally, but if I needed anything, I could call up and they would absolutely be there for me. And I know that I would offer the same. I just hope that they know that. But yes, the Latin community is very, very tight knit, especially because we're kind of anathema with the Pope not wanting us around. So that means most of the Novus Ordo people don't either.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's this concept of I hate to draw this comparison, but it actually kind of makes sense here. But a barrier to entry is generally like a very good thing for cohesion within a group, and getting to the point. I mean, uh, you see this with something like dating apps where people have to actually pay a price to be on it. There tends to be a lot more work that gets done on the relationship front in those areas, and I can imagine it's in the same way. It's like you are choosing to go out of your way to do something that is more difficult than just going to a Roman Catholic church that is basically around every single corner in the United States at this point. But you are changing to something that's more akin to your values. I guess my next question would be something about what is like the actual feeling that you get like from the priest? Like would you say he's a little bit more like political, or do you think he's just traditional? What do you think?
He's very traditional. You know, he doesn't play any of the modern sensibilities about things regarding homosexuality or transsexualism, promiscuity. He never makes excuses for it. He's very plain. This is what Christ taught us. We're not going to try to find a way around Christ's teachings for our modern sensibilities. He's also not afraid to talk about how the Jews fell out of favor with God by being silly bastards. Um, I mean, to put it in our parlance, he's very based, and it's very refreshing to see that coming from a priest, um, especially in the modern day when they're all just bending over backwards to try to massage the progressive religion into Christianity.
Yeah, it's weird when you see that because I remember this when like the Roe v. Wade stuff got overturned, and I was in mass, and my priest was bringing this up about how this is a great victory, obviously, for the church, because as much as we've been kind of like digging on the Catholic Church here, they have been very staunch in their support for like the pro-life movement and everything. And I remember overhearing people as I was walking out of the mass, and they were talking about like, I thought the church, like, is supposed to stay out of like these politics kind of things. Like it was like a group of women that were kind of like complaining about it passively. It's like, whatever happened to like not being political kind of deal, which is, as far as I'm concerned, like it's just absurd. And it's just like this like meme pathogen that has been spread amongst everybody. This idea of like separation of church and state.
Yeah, I mean, your values are political. you carry the things that you value forward into the political realm because you want to see your values expressed by your representatives and expressed in the laws of the country that you live in. So, and again, this speaks to the age where the progressive religion informs you of your values before the Christianity that you nominally adhere to. So if you took your Christian values before the progressive ones, this is just a no-brainer. Of course, you're pro-life and you would never tolerate this sort of thing. But because your progressive values actually come first for most people, they say, oh, well, this is up for debate. This is something that we can talk about. The church should stay out of it. It's very, uh, very indicative of the times that we're in. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, you don't only just see this from the left side of this here. You also see it from church members that are on the right, where they kind of almost take a different approach to this, saying like, well, the church is above all of this. Like the church transcends, political matters and such, and they're like of the earth. They're worldly things, and we shouldn't really be discussing them in this regard. And I think that's also a backdoor like subversion that's been thrown out there as well. And especially in the context of America, because this idea of separation of church and state and free religion, granted under the First Amendment. But you and I both know there was never a time when the founding fathers were envisioning that this country would have competing religions of, Islam, modern progressivism, Christianity, all these things. They envisioned this nation no state religion because there were competing factions of Christianity in this nation. They didn't want to advance, Quakers over Lutherans over another denomination of Protestant or another Catholic or something like this. They never would have envisioned something like we have today in this country.
Yeah, I think that even the whole reason that the separation of church and state was put in to the Bill of Rights in the first place is because Thomas Jefferson was trying to mediate a conflict between uh, the Catholics of Danbury, Connecticut, and the Protestants of Waterbury, Connecticut, or maybe the other way around. But it the founders were a white Christian nation. We have white Christian values, or they would conceive of it as being a very small section of European Christian values. You're absolutely right that these discussion, the idea that the country would devolve into this as they say, melting pot of just brown refuse was something that they would have just been like, well, if this is going to happen, why even bother?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, why even have a nation at that point if everything goes? Things are defined by their borders. Things are defined by their exceptions to things. And if you're just going to have everything be free willy, nilly such, I mean, it's no wonder we live in the world that we live in today, which again is a perfect opportunity for us to rip on libertarians, as they are deserved of ridicule.
Yeah, there's a reason they're called lolberts. But yeah, I mean, there's going to, like I said before, there's definitely going to come a time when Christianity becomes more masculine again, because it's going to have to, or it's going to just die. And I don't think that Christ's word on earth is ever again going to lapse, uh, into history. So it's in one of the white pills that I could drop on this is my Latin congregation has a lot of young couples with young children, and every year, every couple of months, there is a new wedding between a woman who recently came of age and someone that's been in the congregation, and it's just kind of like it's a beautiful cycle of new babies screaming during the mass every other week.
Yeah, I mean, good problems to have all around for sure. But yeah, I think I mean, I agree. And I think you're right that, as the material conditions continue to decline throughout the Western world, which again is the ancestral homeland of Christianity, which I guess is another gripe that people have, or saying like, oh, like Christianity's heritage is really in like Galilee in the Middle East, when as far as I'm concerned, like it's of the West, it's of Faustian man. It is Faustian man's religion is Christianity. I mean, people would argue whether it's Catholicism or Protestantism. I would say it's obviously Catholicism because that was what was around first. But we don't need to ignite any more ancient feuds here on this stream. But
Too late.
yeah, exactly. Too late indeed. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like as these conditions continue to get worse, the true I guess we call it like harbingers of the faith are going to have to adopt this left hand path here, because it's going to be their only choice.
Yeah, and what comes out of the ashes, Christ predicted that the church would be dissolute by the time he returns. So it's one of these things that Mr. D says he he might be black-pilled for the material conditions of today, but in the end, Christ wins. So
Yeah, absolutely. Good will indeed triumph over evil. It's the natural order of things. Um, now, are there any other things you want to bring up here? We got a little bit of time left here, but we covered all the major points that I wanted to touch up on here. Anything else you want to bring up?
yeah, I just wanted to bring up something I was reading when I was reading Evola and the Ghibellines. Something I didn't realize. He mentions he says this is how the legends arose that revived the theme of the dry tree, the blossoming of which was attributed to an emperor who will wage war against the clergy. So it just
Huh.
reminds me, the white tree of Gondor. Like
Yeah.
it's an ancient legend that supposes the emperor will come back and lead both the kingdom and the church and take back the solar right from the clergy.
Yeah, the God King. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very much so. Um, yeah, I mean, we certainly live in interesting times, at the very least here, but you know,
Wouldn't
uh,
trade it.
yeah, I mean, what do you think that like people can do, and maybe people in the chat here are I know it's a very cringe term, but whenever people ask me about my denomination at this point, I just say non-denominational, and I understand it's very, very cringe, but I haven't found a spiritual home yet in Christianity so far. I have no doubt that I will eventually find one, whatever that may be. I mean, we've got a bunch of friends of ours that have, found their home in Lutheranism or Orthodoxy, or gone back to Catholicism or whatever. And I have no doubt that I as well will eventually find one, of course. But do you think there's any advice you can give for people to seek out maybe something that you've got going there with the Latin Mass?
Yeah, I mean, find something that resonates with you and just stick with it. Like, don't shop around endlessly until you find something that's going to fit that perfect God-shaped hole in your heart, right?
You
Um,
sound like a woman on a dating app. Yeah.
I know, right? Uh, it's the idea of letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. As soon as it's something that kind of resonates with you, just stick with it. It's also, I know this sounds very strange, but dogmatism for a questioning mind is going to be the death of your faith. Unless you are completely fanatical and monomaniacal, it's going to tear at you. So, for example, I spoke about Evola today, and I obviously we in the DR sphere, and I know Red Hawk is on board with this as well. We read figures like Nietzsche, we read Evola, we read Spengler, and the Bible may be the Word of God that contains the most important information. It does not contain all the information. So don't let yourself become a dogmatist, or you're going to miss out on a lot.
Mm, yeah, I very much agree. There, of course, there is plenty of wisdom to be found in the Bible, but there's plenty more that I've found that has had a deep impact on my life that I've found in other thinkers and speakers as well. So for sure, definitely take a look at those. But we are coming up on the hour mark here. Anything else you want to talk about, man, or shall we wrap it up?
Yeah, no, that's exhausted me. I just wanted to read this last bit from Evola because I appreciate his doomerism and his prescience. Following the Ghibelline civilization, which we may regard as the splendid spring season of a Europe that was destined to doom, the process of decadence will continue inexorably.
He really is such a doomer, isn't he? Yeah. But very good indeed. Well, anything you want to promote, sir?
Check out the Old Glory Club, Substack, YouTube. Look to us for a fraternal organization that can help you survive into the future, a network of like minds and capable men, which is the most important bit. And you can follow me on NotMeNotYou also on Twitter. And that's me.
All right, cool. Yes, indeed. You will see myself and Not Me, Not You contributing over at the Old Glory Club, which I will be, of course, attending our Pony Express radio streams at 8 o'clock here every Thursday. So go and take a look at that in 30 minutes here. Maybe we'll get lucky and Trump's. A mugshot will be released live while we're doing the show. So that'll be interesting for people to check out. But yeah, of course, check out the Substack, check out the OGC, check me out on Twitter and all that good stuff. And thanks for coming by, guys. And we'll see you again next week.
Be well all.